time coming. I'll come back to a few bits. No, she's not going to take them. Wait for it to come on there. If there's some place open, John, do
Okay, I will simulate it. Show me everything. Number of cycles, period of time. So everything. So what's the next step? I don't know what's the next step. I cannot show this everything in one So by the time you start to get
Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay. Sorry, yeah. And of course, it's that time as well, it's 4 o'clock. Sorry. Yeah, well spotted, yeah, okay. We'll recap it anyway, but... Fix a boundary condition, right? So that is fixed to one side, that is fixed to the other side, that is some more and you have to apply, okay, I should put this on the road. Yeah, or you fix this, and apply a load here or in this surface. Yeah, and then just solve it with the after you get the we have to explain what's that. We have to see how we can better it. So, sorry, John, I normally take them. So you have a stick, have you?
I have a stick, so I'll just go.
I'm happy to work off
I see some people have the kind of slightly different size, but there's nothing radically different.
Okay.
It's just change it to the ordinary, I'd say. Yeah. So go to like the army there the other day last year. Generally be the first time in the army. Well, I have leadership presentation second one.
Oh, the second one. Sorry, just give you your file properties anyway. If I can keep my hands steady.
And it was
Second one, yeah.
Second. It was gas because I went in and they had actually put up the wrong set and they were prepared genuine printable ones that have to, so I had to read the whole thing. But it's funny.
Yeah.
Oh, so you know what it is?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
They don't know what you're.
That's all right. So you're off the stick.
And I'll just go straight there from the beginning.
I'll hover around the back somewhere, John. If that's all right. No, sorry, I forgot to turn the projector. Let's see. Why is that not coming up now?
So I can start off.
Was that on, was it?
No.
Oh, it wasn't. Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of like
But it's reading off that laptop.
PC.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
There you are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, because it was on already. I think it was just reading off the document. Thanks, John. Super. Afternoon, everybody. All okay? Good. So, apologies, by the way, I haven't seen you for a few weeks, but apologies for the confusion with the class we missed on the 27th of October with Dr. Weir, but we've rescheduled that anyway.
So I'll update the module map that's online. That's scheduled to the 8th of December, which one of your colleagues reminded me clashes with the graduation. Obviously not your graduation, but last year's class graduating. Some of you who have done BEng with us last year, I guess. So look, we'll recap it, right? Everything working okay with recap and that? I think there was some queries about the library stuff. Remember the classes you did with the library? Well, but they're all on recap now, I've checked, okay? So with Julia Robinson from the library. So anyway, anything that's not in recap, just let me know, because sometimes it's just funny stuff with the settings and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so we're advancing through the course. We had the introductory lecture with me. We had Nick with marketing last week, and we're continuing on now today with Dr. John Cullen. Delighted to have John here. Thank you, John, for taking 2 days. Take 2 days out of his schedule to do this, because can't bring him over here without taking him for a few beers tonight and all that sort of stuff. So can't send him back home. So
I always wondered what beer tasted like.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, educational for me.
Yeah, you'll know by tomorrow anyway, John. But so he won't be back till tomorrow. So just to thank John for going. It's normally really vigorous, full of life type of lecture. Again, I mean, the deals I have with the class, John, is that when we come to set the exam, that there's a number of different topics that they cover, and they can basically then pick which ones to focus on for the exam and that. So today's topic is leadership, and there'll obviously be a question, maybe with some sub-questions on leadership. It's up to you then whether you decide to do it or not. Anyway, we'll talk about exams later on. For now, we just focus on learning and that. I will as well, once we get to December, schedule those workshops we mentioned. So we have a couple of workshops. We have someone from McKinsey actually coming, John. Yeah, and
What are they doing?
she's going to talk to them about transitioning from technical background to the commercial world. And she herself is a medical doctor. So a lot of our marine people here are very focused on ships and offshore and with your head stuck down pipelines and all sorts of things. So when you go out to the real world, looking at leadership and balance sheets and marketing plans and all that sort of stuff. So I'll get those scheduled now over the next week or two, because we'll get those seminars scheduled into December. Okay. So I think that's it on the housekeeping. As I say, I've mentioned to you about the sorry, just talking to myself here. This is my note to remember to bring markers, which I just see now, which isn't much bloody good. But okay, attendance lists are going around, are they? They haven't, because they're here. I know I've got a few LinkedIn requests from some of you, just to remind you, we're not being ignorant, ignoring you, but we can't link in with a current student. So we'll all link in as one big happy family once you finish, okay? Which is cool, yeah? But just not at the moment. I know sometimes those requests automatically get sent, basically, by your system. So the two attendance lists, MAR8076, MAR8064, you're obviously only assigned one, because you can only be in one class. And that's it. So again, just thanks to John for coming. As I say, he's an expert in leadership, in the area of leadership. Some of you here are going to be famous leaders in the future. Yeah. Looking at the uncertain world we live in, I was reading an article 2 days ago about why Trump wouldn't be president. You know? I guess the guy wanted to scrub that article fairly quickly. So the world is so uncertain, basically, right? So the idea of leadership, and John has really devoted his life to studying this and teach that, and indeed did his own PhD in Lancaster with John Burgoyne, who would be one of the key leaders in this field as well. Okay. So that's it. So thanks, John. So we've stuck the slides on Blackboard. You were saying that there might be one or two little tweaks, and then.
We've done a bit of resequencing on them as well. But generally speaking, what you'll see here is what's on there. But don't worry if you don't see any of the slides in the order that they're appearing, because they are there in some shape and form. John, can
cool.
link in to me if they want, or.
They can, John. I'll throw them over here, sorry.
And the reason I ask that, I say that is,
Of course they can.
Every time after these sessions, I do kind of cover a lot of material very quickly. People afterwards ask me, where did that come from? I want to explore it afterwards. So rather than kind of, I think because you said there's beers waiting, rather than wait that, cut into that sacred time. We should, you can email me. There's my email address. It's john.g.cullen@nuim.ie. If you have any questions, then afterwards, and I'll usually send on some details on that afterwards. It's NUIM, which is the former name for my university, which is National University of Ireland, Maynooth. Now it's called Maynooth University, or MU, or Monster University, as the students call it. So that's it. Make sure you get the G in there. It's john.g.cullen if you need to email me, because there is a John.Cullen in Maynooth University who receives my emails but doesn't forward them to me. If I find him, there's a bounty on his head. So,
Thanks, John. I'll open windows if it gets too hot. There's a few people wearing hats, so I'm assuming that they're not too hot.
That's all right.
Right, I'll leave you in peace. Sorry,
No-
I'll just
no problem, John.
There and get a few. Anyway, thanks.
so
John.
the first job that I have for you, in groups where you're naturally sitting, so you've got two people there, very smiling person down low, and 2 or 3 or 4s or whatever. Is anybody on their own? Anybody lonely? Need a friend? No one's going to admit to that, are they? Right? You're pointing at somebody over there. Group up with people. Just take a few minutes. Just take a few minutes to write down your definition of leadership. Don't look at the slides, at the notes. Just top of your head. Define leadership.
together. Not according to this one.
You're not going to Google it. It's cheating.
You didn't say that before.
So you didn't Google it. You're saying, oh, we're Googling it. Just kind of, no, the phone's got into our hands. From Google. Yeah.
Okay, keywords is fine. Is that 3 minutes? Nelson was saying there that most people in the class, your engineering graduates, are from an engineering background, yes? Yeah. Most chief executives and business leaders around the world, you've probably heard this stat already, John, sorry? I think it's something like 80% come from your background. So when we talk about leadership in society, businesses, in organizations, government bodies, we're talking to people like you, the chances are that you are statistically more likely to actually end up doing it. So this is important. Okay? Did you know that? Yeah. Engineers tend to be leaders. Yeah. End up in leadership in organizations. So what do you have? Sorry, I won't ask what Google that. No, you'll Google them here. Call them out to me. I'll start scribbling them up.
Ability to influence people willingly.
Influence. Excuse my handwriting. Yeah. Influence. Yeah.
Inspiring.
Inspire. Everyone's going, we don't want to say that. Inspire. Influence, inspire.
Managing information.
Managing information.
Managing people.
Managing. Okay. And I'm actually going to put people here as well.
Achieving goals.
And I'm going to put achieving and goals here.
That's all I think.
That's all you got?
Yeah, it's 3 minutes.
Within 3 minutes. Okay. That's what Google can get you 3 minutes. Well done. But that's, I'm sure a lot of other people had those things. Who else also had inspire? See your hands? Who had influence? Achieving? Who had goals? Goals. What else? Sorry, I don't know friends with that hat there. We were asked about the difference between inspire and motivate. Yeah, motivation. So motivating. What else do you have?
Promote openness.
Look at that. Promoting openness. Yeah. Tell us more about promoting openness. Okay.
Promote like his colleagues.
Yeah.
Go out and tell their ideas and explain.
Okay.
Don't stop them in thinking anything else.
Great. Thank you. What's your name, sir?
Jim.
Jim. Now, anybody have anything different or anything to add? Yes.
Integrity.
Integrity. Great. Does everybody know what integrity means?
Technically,
Technically,
What do you mean technically?
Engineering.
Oh, engineering. No, okay. So, what would you say the non-engineering version of it? Integrity, ethically or morally. What does integrity mean?
Do as you want and not what you want.
Do as you
Ought and not what you want.
do as you ought and not as you want. John actually gave me a really good definition of integrity there last year. Do you remember?
What you do when people aren't looking.
Yeah. There's this what is it called? It's in Plato's book Glaucon, and they discuss this ancient Greek myth, which I think is the myth of Gyges. Could be wrong with the name now. And it's a thought experiment. There's a magic ring that somebody has. They put it on your finger and it makes you invisible. What would you do if you were invisible? Don't answer that. What would you do? Would you know what most females say they do? Right? They would listen to what their friends say about them when they're not around. Just get a real sense of them. I can't even imagine what men would do if they were invisible. There you go. Okay, anything else?
Backbone.
Sorry?
Backbone of his group.
The backbone. Give me a better word for it. I know what you mean. What's it? You're saying that the leader is the backbone of their group, so they're kind of the support for their group. Anything else?
Respect.
Respect for who or
For the person who the leader.
respect? So they have to be respected. Yeah. And what about this promoting openness? Do they respect their followers? Or? No. Okay, thank you. Promoting reality. Loyalty. Sorry. I used to play drums in a band. Loyalty. Great.
Communicate with employer.
Communication. Now, let's just look at this. Communicating. Did you say with employees? With employees. Okay.
For example, you don't have to decide just by yourself. You have to discuss about what we.
Yeah. Discussing. Is this like openness?
Yeah.
Okay. Responsible for. Responsible for, sir? I just put responsibility. Okay. Good. Responsibility. Impartial. Great. Where would you think being impartial is important for a leader?
Making decisions, not letting making decisions based on the merits of ideas rather than letting anything else
There are two main models of decision making at a managerial level, not a technical level, in organizations. The political model and the rational model. And the rational model says, you've got a problem, you get everybody together to discuss it, you analyse all the information, you sort through it, and on the basis of that you make the best possible decision. It's only used in about 5% of management cases. In most places where a CEO does it, they balance the power interests of the people who are who's powerful or not, to make sure that they don't end up having a very tough life themselves. It's not the best way to make decisions, but it happens because humans are tricky. And there.
Productivity, the ability to enhance productivity.
Enhance productivity, and how would a leader do that?
Comes from the motivating the team. So I think link
Huh?
to that one.
Motivating the team. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Who said this? What's your name? Loudon.
Doran.
Down. Look at this. Why is that important for a leader to be authoritative?
You should control those people.
Control people. All right. Control people. And manage, somebody said?
Yeah, I think it's already
Okay, and managing, controlling. Right. Okay.
selflessness. Selflessness.
Selfless. You'd be a very nice leader, you know that? Selflessness, integrity. What was the other word? That was it. Oh, yes. It's enough, but then you've got the authoritative one like that. Durham, yeah. He's the boss. Anything different there? Anything?
Conflict resolution.
Conflict resolution. Okay. Which I'm guessing is something similar to. Yeah. Anything else?
Dictator.
Dictator. Okay. Afraid of you now. Go on, dictator. Why?
Sometimes your employee may have different opinions. You need
This.
you need to unify their opinions and make only one judgment for your company. Yeah.
Unify.
Yeah.
One decision. Do you know the Labour Party in the UK? The Conservative Party from the time of Margaret Thatcher and before were always considered the natural party of government. Like they were the people who were most suited to govern and to rule. And when, after John Smith died and Tony Blair was in the ascendancy, his advisor Peter Mandelson did a lot of analysis on this, asking people why they felt it was the way. And they said, well look, the Labour Party is, at the time, is too divided. Everything is an argument, that you're not unified. And that's why people think that you wouldn't provide good and strong government. So one of the things that Mandelson did when they were creating the project of New Labour, as it was known at the time, was to, in that general election, was to send a fax, prior to email, a fax message every morning went out to all of the local candidates right across the UK. Whatever the issue of the day was, the way issues come up all the time, and it said, this is the party line on this. This is what you say if anybody, asks you a question. And if anybody didn't agree with it, they were dropped from the candidate, for being an election candidate. And the idea behind that was to make sure that the impression was given that everybody in the Labour Party at the time were all going in the same direction. They were unified and strong, and they shared a clear vision. It was a big part of helping them get elected. I'm going to stop there with the definitions. These are great. And what's really interesting about them is they're all different. In fact, there have been more books, articles, and PhDs written on the topic of leadership than any other topic in the field of business management and organisation studies. And given that 60 to 70% of the global population of students all over the world are business students, this means that there is more done on leadership. There's more research work has been done on leadership than on any other topic, any other single topic in academia over the last 50 years. And because of that, there are more definitions of leadership than there are of anything else. In fact, I think we've got a count of one project that tried to look at all the different definitions of leadership that came from these studies, and they gave up when they hit 10,000. So if there's more definitions about leadership that people can actually count or quantify, does it really mean anything at all? Here's another one. Of all of the leaders in the world now, which one would you least like to have as your boss? Least like to have as your boss. Least like to have. Just think about it for a second. So typo there. Sorry. Of all the leaders in the world now. Yeah, sorry. Of all the leaders in the world now, who would you least like to have as your... Think with this. Right? Now, can I just ask a couple of things? No political leaders from, well, unless there's somebody in the, if there's anybody, if you're sure that there is nobody in this class from that country, honestly, then you can say. Right? If you're sure, but if you're not, there isn't. And you also can't say anybody who's in the room. Right? So of all the leaders that you know, which are your next boss, who would you least like to have? Your hand went up straight away over there. Okay. Sorry, your name?
Marcus.
Marcus.
It was political.
It was what?
Political.
Did it begin with a D?
Yeah.
Yeah. And is it like somebody who kind of won an election yesterday? Yeah. Okay. process of deduction continues here. Okay, so is anybody else with Marcus on that? Just one. Everybody else would have voted Trump, yes? Yeah? Yeah. You don't? Okay, sorry. By yet you meant no. Okay, so Trump would be, and why not Marcus?
That is just a joke. His policies, I don't agree with them.
His policies. Okay, now particularly as your immediate boss, if you used to take over whatever job you're going to be doing next, why wouldn't you like Trump?
Because he discriminates and he is not like supporting people, and he's sexist.
He's sexist, yeah. Well, he has said some terribly sexist things, which probably does make him a sexist. Yeah, it does make him a sexist.
So we would prefer Kim Jong-un instead of Trump.
Pardon me?
We would prefer Kim Jong-un instead of Trump.
Okay, so that's no. Okay. Anybody else? Leaders in the world, can you think of one? Everybody write down one. Now, here's the thing. Write down, I know we've got Trump in the world, write down somebody who you might have worked for in the past. Right? Write for somebody who you might have worked for in the past, or somebody you know. Now don't write down their name, but just kind of in yourself, and think about the reasons why you would not like them to be your boss. And I know it'd be hard to, if you really dislike them, you could put a lot of reasons, but think of the top 3 reasons why you wouldn't like to work for this person. Can you think of them? Just do it now really quickly. I'm going to ask you the reasons and not the name. Just take a minute or two. This is really whatever off the top of your head. Moses here is able to think of somebody straight away. We won't mention the person's name, but he says the person and you directly. Yeah. Too authoritative. Hate to work. That type of thing. So we've got authoritative. Anybody else want to share the reason of the name? Yep. Blow things out of proportion. We say somebody who's, I was doing some work with some officers in Irish Army from last week. His term is in 2 weeks. A lot of respect for. Has that happened to you? The name of the person.
Very great.
Very common. The reason it tells you a lot of the not always
Yeah, she just.
lack of recognition of achievements. This, right? Lack of recognition. Is it important for you to receive recognition for your jobs?
Now, just to put yourself into a leadership position, because this is important as well, right? How do you let people know that you recognize their efforts, that you respect them, that you, I don't know, that you recognize their efforts and their achievements? How do you practically do that?
First way is most easy. It's like, good job, well done, thank you. It's like a verbal.
Yeah.
Expressing verbal your
How often do you do it? So what's your name?
Angelus.
Angus.
Angelus, yes.
Okay. So how do you know when to do this?
How do you know?
Yeah.
When I ask when a leader or anything who's ask somebody to do something for him, and that the employee like does it in time, does it efficiently, well done, like simple words. Thank you.
One of the original behavioral studies was trying to look at how you motivate behavior, okay, in a workplace. How do you motivate behavior? And it was, sorry, not in the workplace, they did it in an animal lab. They started off doing it with a bunch of lab rats. And they had devised a mechanism. They were trying to see how they could actually get the lab rats to press a lever with one of their feet. Don't try to visualize the rats doing this. Try to press a lever with one of their feet. And they rigged it up to a device that released a food pellet each time the lever was touched. So you press the lever, food pellet comes out. And I thought, this is great, but the lab rats were just tapping it all the time to get food. They didn't. Because the lab rats, being very intelligent animals, figured out very quickly, I will always have food whenever I want it by just tapping this thing. So I'll leave it alone. You know, I'll only tap it once in a while. So they changed the device so that it would only release a pellet sometimes when the pellet was released. And the result was the rats tapped it all the time. This is something that's called partial reinforcement. If you want somebody to continue to perform and to be productive in work, it means that yes, you do. If you ignore them all the time, it'll leave them feeling unsure. They need some feedback about how they're doing. It's wrong. But if you're going up to them and you're saying, after everything they're doing, Nelson, well done. You know, that job you did today, fantastic. Well done. Well done again. You know, and you're just every time he does something, you're thanking. Eventually he'll go, I don't care. But if you do a really big piece of work for me and you stay in late and you work and everything, and I don't thank you, you'll probably be a little bit, okay, what happened there? But then a few days later, if you do something small and I say, listen, thank you very much for that or whatever, then you're more likely to respond to try and get and try and get some praise. So respect and recognition is important, but not all the time. Not all the time. Sorry, I know you're not a lab rat, but it works differently for humans. Just think about the different answers that you've been given, that you have in front of yourself, okay? And we'll move on to this. Which of the following people would you most like to have as your boss? You know him? Right? Everybody giving thumbs up here, right? Which of the following? So there's one. Another one. Not the best photograph of Secretary Clinton ever taken, but she had a thumb up. Oh, look at all the heads nodding. Everybody loves them, don't they? You know her? Do you know her? That's Oprah Winfrey. Do you know her? Or just Oprah, as she's known. You may not know this guy, or maybe you do. Michael O'Leary, CEO of Ryanair. That's his version of the thumbs up. Do you know him? Some people do. He has, how would I diplomatically say this, John? Michael O'Leary has a very particular way of communicating with people. He famously described his passengers as being pains in the arse. Right? He uses very, very strong language when anybody approaches him. He's completely about his organisation, and he has a reputation for being very direct and very aggressive with employees, and basically saying, you don't want to work for me, get lost, go work for somebody else. His competitors originally in the Irish routes were like BA and Aer Lingus, and he spoke about them with contempt that bordered on a level of insult. But yet, he changed this small, what were they, 1991 airplane, John, yeah? Into being Europe's largest airline.
Biggest market capitalisation of any airline in the world.
The biggest market capitalisation of any airline in the world. Phenomenal success. basically brought the low fares model to Europe. And he didn't change the airline, he changed the entire aviation industry in Europe.
I think he famously called the guy that runs EasyJet Stelios as a tosser.
Yeah. That's probably one of the nicest things. They probably like
He said he was a tosser, but not bad for a rich tosser.
Right. So which one of these, just for yourselves, would you most like to have as your boss? Who says Michael O'Leary? Anyone? You probably don't know him as much, okay?
Yeah, we don't know.
This guy?
Don't know.
You don't know him?
Okay.
Have you been in prison for the last year or so? You don't know him? Okay. Here, let's see your hands.
Yeah.
More. Some people, you've got to pick one of the five, okay? You can't say none of the above. I would choose me as my boss. Oprah? Wow. It's pretty interesting. And Hillary? What about the people? Yes! We have one Hillary supporter at the back there. In fact, when I first saw you, that's what I thought. Why Hillary?
Because she was the one of the five I had to pick.
Okay, but I'll the five then.
It was the last one. I don't see any good options.
But give me a good option. Who do you most like in the world of fashion?
Maybe somebody like myself.
Can anybody, if they're not on the list, can you think of the person you'd most like? Yes. And the reason why? And just write them down. One reason. Because what you've just done is looked at your first draft of something that's called an implicit leadership theory. And this is why it's important to distill this for yourself right at the start. You've just considered, you've written down the definition of leadership, and you've used words that are, how do I turn that? You've used words that conflict. There is no one definition of leadership out there. Some people want unity, one decision, dictator even. Some people want authority. Some people want somebody who's going to show, the more ethical approach, like integrity, teaching people in impartiality. You've got people who are, instead of being the authoritative voice, some people don't like that, and they prefer somebody who promotes openness and fosters communication with employees. It's all out there. The thing is, it's different for everybody. Who was the worst of the five on the previous slide? Trump, okay? Everybody says Trump? Mm-hmm. Except, the worst of Trump. No, you weren't. But how come then, 52% of the popular vote? Well, it was more than that, wasn't it? Yeah. 52% of the people in one of the most populous economic powerhouses in the world thought that he was the best. We all have different ideas of what leadership is, of what it does. And an implicit leadership theory is your own theory that you have subconsciously been drafting in your mind, since you were born, that you've developed over your life, you tacitly hold and you use to make sense of the actions and activities of leaders. What does tacit mean? Tacit knowledge?
Without speaking?
Sorry?
Without the speaking?
Yeah. Who said that? Sorry, I thought somebody said that without actually speaking. I couldn't see it for your person. Okay, so tacit knowledge is knowledge that you have, what you don't know you have. So, for example, does anybody play soccer? No. Anybody? That's not a tacit knowledge. Anybody swim? Yeah. Who told you when you were learning to do the front crawl to keep your lungs exactly half full of air to make sure that you remain afloat when you're doing the front crawl? Did anybody ever tell you that? But you do it, don't you? When you think about it, watch it next time you're swimming. You do that. That's knowledge that you pick up. The reason I was asked about soccer is that did anybody ever tell you that it's not we say you're taking a shot on goal, it's not the amount of power that you put into your kick that makes it go on to target, it's the way that you time the kick. Somebody told you that? But it's true, isn't it? It just makes a difference. This is knowledge that you have that you don't know that you have. And you have an implicit leadership theory. And the best way of understanding it is to make it explicit, and you do this through writing it down. So I think that's what you meant by without speaking. You've got the material for your first draft of this here now in this form. It's, these Rorschach ink block tests that psychiatrists used to use that show an ink block test, and they'll say, what they're trying to use to psychoanalyze people. What does that remind you of? To try and bring out stuff from your subconscious. You've just gone through the equivalent of that. These definitions are definitions that you have picked up about what other people think leadership is. They may influence you, but they're other people's definitions about what good leadership is and what it isn't. And you may have seen it down somewhere, you may have picked it up culturally, but you got it from somewhere else. When we looked at who you'd least like to have as your boss, the person doesn't really matter, although we have a name down there, don't we know? The person doesn't matter. It's the way that they behaved, which seemed to actually be in a lot of the other students' definitions as well. That's what you think leadership is not. That's what you reject. I see that's not leadership. The final part, when I was trying to get you to think of somebody who you'd most like to have as your leader, and the reasons why that leader emulates leadership for you, the reasons are what you think leadership is. Now, it's really important that you have somewhere written down in your journal or in your files or everything, your working draft of your implicit leadership study. The reason for that is that you will probably work directly with a real leader, a transformative leader about 2 or 3 times in your life who will help you realize that you can achieve things that you had beforehand never conceived possible. 2 or 3 times. And the sad part of it is that you'll only recognize this after the case. That you'll only realize looking back. You say, there was an opportunity, I should have done other things with it. If you have a working draft of what you believe leadership to be and what it's not, it means that, number one, you'll be equipped to recognize that leader when you encounter them. They'll never declare themselves as a leader for reasons that we're going to look into now. And the second reason is because that tells you how you behave as a leader yourself when it comes to it. So student at the back there was saying, giving praise is important. How are you going to do that to know that it's making a real difference on the people that you work with as you go through? Leadership is something that there's a lot of theory on because it is perhaps one of the biggest fundamental questions about who we are as human beings. Who do we choose to lead, and why do we choose to help people to go in a particular direction? Management was a word that came up a lot, and we often hear this. I think you're saying management there. Management is something that is often confused with leadership. But what exactly is it? Zalesnik he said that managers embrace process and they seek stability and control, whereas leaders embrace unstructured situations and try to understand them before they act them. That was one definition, but look at how old that definition is, 1977. That definition is so old it's almost as old as I am, which is old. And then he said that managers and leaders, think of this, they said they have different attitudes to things. People mentioned goals. Managers look at goals in terms of there being in personal relationships. Leaders try to fully engage people with the goals that they're trying to do. Managers see work as an opportunity to achieve targets, to identify targets and achieve them, whereas leaders look at
at work as being an opportunity to do something new and different. Jim, you were talking about the difference between motivation and inspiration. This says managers try to motivate people to achieve targets. Leaders try to inspire them to find new opportunities. Managers, see what you think of this. This is what Zeleznik said, not me. He said managers like working with other people and leaders like working alone. This might be back to a particular idea of a leader as the person who is kind of above and separate to everybody else working in the organization. Managers, and look at this, he says, managers come from stable backgrounds and they're oriented towards happiness. Leaders have experienced significant personal transformations or crucible experiences. Now, a crucible experience is, do you know what a crucible is? In secondary school, we used to have, they're like small bowls that are made out of porcelain, and you used to get rock salt and put them into it, and then use a thing called a pestle to grind up the rock salt in it. So you grind up the stuff and chew it down. A crucible experience is that thing that you would prefer not to have happened to you. It's the hard stuff. It's the difficulties. It's the really, things that test your mettle as an individual, that really change you. The idea is that when you come out the far side of them, you're still strong, but you have learned things about yourself and how to deal with other people. Leaders have gone through these, according to Zeleznik, but I'm sure. Warren Bennis, who's based at the Stanford Business School, he said that the way he compared management and leadership, he said managers, they motivate by giving people resources. Leaders try to motivate people by developing new objectives. Managers take the short-range view, leaders take a long-range perspective. Managers are copies of other managers. They all think the same, whereas leaders are truly original and truly unique. A manager tries to maintain things where a leader focuses on developing them. A manager, look at this, a manager focuses on system and structure, whereas a leader focuses on people. And we had people mentioned there.
People, yeah.
Oh, here we are. People, yeah. People. A manager implements strategies that have been developed by other people. A leader shapes their own strategies. A manager tries to rely on control, whereas a leader tries to inspire people to trust them. Instead of forcing people to do things, they try to inspire them to trust them in the first place. Whereas a manager narrows things down to just the bottom line, leader tries to open up horizons. Manager's rational, leader's emotional. A manager challenges the status quo. A manager does things right, whereas a leader does the right thing. What would you say is the most important difference of all of those? The most important one of the lot is this idea, and this is controversial, that leaders do the right thing. The leader is the person who will do the right thing. And of course the difficulty is what do you do? How do you actually end up knowing what that right thing is? And that brings you into a whole different area where leadership becomes quite different. So what's more desirable, management or leadership? Henry Mintzberg said that if you just have management, it's boring. If you have leadership, it's exciting, but it's scary. If you do both together, then people feel safe but excited at the same time. So you may be appointed as a manager, but you can act as a leader despite the position, whatever position you find yourself in. Here's one for you. What's leadership for? Why do we have leadership? What makes it different to other ways in which we can organise ourselves? Keith Grint in 2005, he said that we have to look at leadership as being a completely different thing to management on the basis of how it is, how it helps people deal with problems. And some problems are straightforward and easy to solve, and some of them we don't have a clue how we're going to solve them. Some problems require one person to make a decision to take control of the problem and then to implement it, whereas other problems require a group of people to come together and to work through the problem to resolve it. And Grint said that if you're really certain about how to solve a problem, whatever the issue is, then the problem can be defined as critical. If it's a little bit more complex, then the problem is tame. Finally, if the problem is nobody's even sure whether to define it properly and they don't know whether the solution is going to cause more problems down the line, then that problem is called wicked. And you'll find a lot of material on wicked problems ever since this definition was proposed. So treat that as a different of problems. If you have a need for having a collaborative, there are different types of approaches that you could take to resolving them. First one is coercion or hard power. The next one is, telling people what to do, authoritative dictatorship. Do what I say you're going to do, or else you'll be punished. The next one, I keep hitting the wrong button there, is calculative power, which means, okay, I've got to sit down, I've got to figure out how it is I'm going to resolve this problem. And the third one is a word you'll probably have come across before, which is soft power or normative power. Working with people, listening to them to find out what solutions they can come up with. From this, there are 3 different types of authority that you can bring to bear. If the problem is critical and you're using hard power, you're using an approach that's known as command. You're providing an answer. So, for example, there's a road traffic accident. Some people are injured, the cars are blocking the road, and there's going to be a knock-on effect. Despite the well-being of the people in the accident, there's a knock-on effect it's going to have on lawyers and on traffic congestion and everything. Policemen, ambulance services arrive along and they take command of the situation. They set up the robots. They say, this is what everybody should do here now, and they issue commands. And if people don't, then there's going to be problems for them down the line in forms of legislative power. So that's a command situation, and it doesn't match most of what goes on in management, because managers have a tame problem. It's the problem isn't critical, but there are probably a few different pathways that you can take to it. The manager calculates what the best possible response should be, and they try to organize processes. Now, when the problem is wicked, you don't know what the solution is, and it's going to require a lot of collaboration. This is when leadership is required, and what leaders do is they ask questions. They ask questions. By asking questions, they have to listen to answers. And as a result of that, they're trying to change the nature of the problem, to tame it or to reduce it to a critical solution. We're not trained to listen. We don't live in a society where it's assumed that leaders are always people who listen. We assume that they have the answers, and that's why we vote for them, or that's why boards give them powers in organizations. But that is real leadership, to do it at that level, to actually try and question people about what it is that they're doing. Why do we study leadership? A lot of words here. And this, I think, is a really good one, from a very, very good book about it. It's a very short, fairly cheap and reasonably interesting book about leadership by Ken Jackson and Brad Parry. And the title of the book is A Very Short, Fairly Cheap and Reasonably Interesting Book about Leadership, about studying leadership. It's a great book on this because it encapsulates a lot of this literature. And they say leadership is widely seen as both the problem and solution to all manners of contemporary issues. It's true, isn't it? We have all these problems in society with the natural world and in businesses and in politics. And we know that leadership is the solution. From ending global poverty to turning around organizations to helping communities, the hunger and quest for leadership knowledge appears to be insatiable. There's more written about leadership, as I said before, than any other topic. How much is spent on leadership development around the world every year, would you say? If you remember that. The amount is $60 billion is spent on leadership development books. How much is spent on personal development and self-help? In the US alone, $2.5 billion a year. And these are people, the self-help industry is one that is trying to encourage people to take leadership of their own lives, take over them, how they see things themselves. So there's a huge amount of interest in this field. Most of our understanding of leadership comes from the field of psychology, 20% from sociology, but they're not the only ones. You can get lots written on leadership from politics, media studies, literature, philosophy. Plato wrote one of the first great books on leadership back in 340-something BC called The Republic, and book 10 was about how people actually become leaders in that society. Leadership research is done through practice. It's something that most people don't think of as they're going through their day-to-day life. That you start by practicing to be a leader now, doing whatever it is that you're doing. You have opportunities to change, to influence, to transform people as you do it. You have also a huge amount of opportunities to observe the actual practice and representations of leadership. you look how leaders talk. What was it about Trump that made people listen to him more than they had listened to Hillary Clinton? It's a really salient point. I'm sure anybody can remember, some of the lines that he used. You don't want to repeat them in a lot of cases, right? But can you remember as many defining statements from his competitor, from Hillary Clinton? You can't, because why is it that Trump was more heard? There's more to read about leadership than the leadership research. There's newspapers, there's biographies, there's a whole lot of stuff out there. And one thing that most people say is critical to developing an understanding of yourself as a leader is to keep a journal yourself, to write about your own development as a leader as you go along. Grin says that you understand leadership by looking at who the person, who leaders are, that makes them leaders, the results, what they get, the position where leaders operate, or the process, how they go about getting things done. There are three main types of understanding leadership research. We'll go through them just really briefly now to give you a whirlwind tour of what's going on there. The chronological is we look at contemporary leadership research started roughly in the 1950s after World War II. So if to look at it that way, the first set of large-scale studies that were done on leadership were studies that were done on, they're called trait studies, or big man studies, because sexism aside, 1950s, this is, we assume most men to be leaders, and they're wrong, but okay. What was the one thing, these studies, large-scale studies, surveys done right across the world, what was and they only came up with one trait that people believed all leaders shared, the one thing that they all shared. Not what made them a leader, but what they all shared. What would you say that was? A trait is a personal characteristic. What was the one thing that all of these studies said leaders shared? Is it too late to be asking this question? What would you say? Guess. Go on. Yes.
Break. Are people following them?
They have followers? No. Anyone try? One characteristic.
Vision.
Nope. You were thinking of something.
That interest, that uniqueness.
Uniqueness? Nope. They all share. Knowledge? Nope. Actually, close. Intelligence. All leaders had to share intelligence, but that doesn't really help us because you can be intelligent and not be a leader. So that trait studies kind of weren't really studied. The personal characteristics of leaders weren't really studied as much after that. So studies began to look at how they merged different styles and different approaches to doing things. And one of the main ways in which this was done was assuming that there were three different types of leadership styles that people could adopt. Look at the three styles, and these were all on the board. You have authoritative. We all know what an authoritative leader is. Or you can be a democratic leader, also up on the board, isn't it? Democratic. Yeah, these are the people who try to communicate, promote openness and get the opinions of their employees. And the final one was what they call laissez-faire. What does laissez-faire mean? Leave it alone or let it be. So you've got three different types of leaders that you can possibly be. An authoritative leader is, I'm going to tell you what to do. A democratic leader is, let's everybody come together and decide what we're going to do. And laissez-faire is, don't do anything. It'll sort itself out. What type of boss do most people prefer? Authoritative, democratic, or laissez-faire? Which one is the preferred? Democratic, everyone says? Anyone disagree? Under normal, stable circumstances, people prefer a democratic boss. But how rare are normal, stable circumstances? When there's a crisis, when everything begins to collapse, people don't want. Yeah.
when the financial crisis happened in Ireland, I remember, the US, people were saying, well, what we're getting from President Bush was we're getting commentary, we're not getting any decisions. You know, everybody was talking about what had caused the crisis. And this happened right across the world. When you have an authoritative approach is required when there's a crisis. You need people to get in, to take control, to demand. A democratic approach is used otherwise, and laissez-faire is never an option. People hate bosses, or they hate leaders who don't make decisions, because they assume that they don't care. And if your leader doesn't care, why should you care? People want to care about the work they do. Another type of approach is this idea that all bosses, look at this, because systems are mentioned there as well, weren't they? What's this? Is that you can have a high level of concern for people, say up here is high and here is low, or you can have a high level of concern for what we call production, or the technical output of your organization. Some bosses, some are high on production, they're all about the engineering side of the work, and some are very, very good on keeping everybody in the organization happy. And these studies suggested that if you can get a leader who's high on both people and, high on a concern for people and a high on a concern for production, that's the optimal type of leader that you can have. Somebody who does both concern for people and concern for production. Contingencies, this was later taken over by contingency theory because they thought, well, there has to be more to leadership than just that. Which looked at the context in which leadership was done, particularly in relation to change. Leadership is needed when things are changing because you need people to steward it. And you begin to see the first mentions of the importance of followers and their readiness to change or their readiness to follow the leader. The leader's job was to clarify the tasks that had to be done. The fourth type, and we're talking about the 1980s here, looked at a form of leadership that was called charismatic leadership. You've heard of charismatic leadership before? Anyone? Charismatic. In the 1980s, these were very, they were like performers. These were people who went out and they made they were so enthusiastic and they were very strong personalities, and they almost love bombed their employees into doing a type of work that just inspired them. So it's primarily communicative. This all fell apart really in the early years of the 2000s, when people realized that a lot of these bosses ended up heading up companies like WorldCom and Enron, and they were very charismatic, but it was all style over substance. But the word charisma is very, very important to leadership studies. And the roots of it go back 100 years to Max Weber. That's a YouTube clip that I'm not going to play because I don't want to take up all audience time as well. And the YouTube clip is, do you watch Game of Thrones?
Yep.
No? Do you know the scene where, I think season 2, where the Queen, Cersei Lannister, she gives her Google it on YouTube, knowledge is power. No, is it the one? And she tells him that power is really whoever's holding the biggest sword and has the most guards with them. So. Max Weber, probably he's the father of modern sociology. And he said, he studied organizations and he was trying to get to the bottom of, he knew that managers needed some form of authority to get people to do what they were meant to be doing. Otherwise they wouldn't do it. So he said that he realized that managers could, if they wanted to, or supervisors, they could control their employees by always being able to punish them if they did something wrong. That's not a good use of a manager's time, and practically it's impossible to do. So then, power doesn't stem from domination. The better way around this, and the way that it actually worked in organizations, was for followers, subordinates, or employees to believe that their manager had a right and a duty to have authority over them.
So the three forms of authority in organizations, he said: traditional, which is headship, you're put into a certain position, people should follow you as a result of your rank. Legal rational is the idea that a manager can sack you if you don't do your job. And the third form of authority, which is the most important one, and the one that's related to leadership, is a thing called charisma. The original meaning of charisma it comes from the word grace, or a spiritual gift from God. This is a long quote from Weber. He says, just want to read this slide. The term charisma will be applied to a certain quality of an individual personality by virtue of whether he's considered extraordinary and treated as endowed with supernatural, superhuman, or at least specifically exceptional qualities. These are not accessible to the ordinary person, but is regarded of divine origin. And on the basis of them, the leader is concerned as treated. The individual concerned is treated as a leader. So there's some idea here that if somebody is a leader, that they have been blessed or given a divine grace. So he says that in contemporary organization, gifted managers are treated as though they've received this grace, and more importantly, followers project this onto them. So it's an individual personality that followers attribute and treat people in turn. That's the important bit of it. So get this right. Somebody is in a position of leadership. People tend to believe that they have some exceptional quality that most people don't have, almost to the extent that it's a supernatural ability. Which leads us to, I think, what's the fifth form of leadership, and where we are at the moment. I used to call it anti-charismatic theory, but really it's a form of leadership that's called, it's a form of an approach to leadership which links the field of ethics very closely with leadership. Look at the title of this book, Ethics, the Heart of Leadership. Is that true though? Is leadership really about ethics? This is a literature review I tried to do this. A lot of people are saying this is quite important. And then if you look at published peer-reviewed research articles on leadership in the Social Sciences Citation Index, just by title alone, there are currently 18,981 articles that are just with leadership in the title, just in the Social Sciences Citation Index. And in the business and management field, 6,069. Okay, so there's a lot of research that's been done there. If you do the same thing with ethics, there are more articles on ethics in general, and just half the amount in business and management. So you think, okay, look, there's a lot of articles there in leadership and ethics. How many have been done on, that look at the ethical nature of leadership? The truth is 60, compared to 26,110 in ethics alone. This is an under-researched field that people are only really beginning to understand now at the moment. Because when you think of it, ethics is quite a different area, but it is always imbued leadership theory. You've heard the word transactional leadership and transformational leadership, no? In 1978, James McGregor Byrne, a political scientist, wrote, he identified two forms of leadership. Transactional, where leaders get things done with exchange relationships with followers. In other words, if I want you to do something, I'm going to promise you a reward for doing it, you do it in return, you get the work, we transact on the basis of that. But he said that's okay to a certain point. Transformational leadership, on the other hand, says that leaders, will always transact with followers, but they also try to transform their values to raise them to a higher level of morality. That's what he's saying, is that what transformational leadership does is you're actually trying to change the beliefs and values of people who follow you. And as a result of this, followers become more moral. This was picked up in 1985 by the main name in transformational leadership and business management studies, Bernard Bass. But he tried to get rid of the moral element from it. He said that what real leadership is about changing the values of people. So instead of transcending their personal goals or changing themselves, they try to change the way that they work for the organisation in turn. But he later went back and said that ethics was more important. There have been lots of critiques of this approach. Are we trying to convert followers to something else? Are we trying to change who they believe they are? Is it an attack on their selfhood? A lot of criticisms that have been made. One of the more recent ones by a guy called Dennis Turish. He said, he wrote a book called The Dark Side of Transformational Leadership, and he said, are transformational leaders really trying to create cults? Are they trying to get people to follow them and do things that they otherwise would not do? One of the Defence Forces officers that I worked with, and I met him years ago when he was a lieutenant, he said something that shocked me.
where I was asking for examples, you know, best leaders that they've had in the Defence Forces. They spend a huge amount of time trying to, you know, develop leadership skills, because obviously they're required. And this guy was a junior officer, and he was explaining to me somebody he thought was the best leader ever, who transformed him and whatever. And then he threw in this little line at the end of it. He said, and you know, be prepared to be shocked by this, because I certainly was. And he said he was a great leader. I'd do anything for him. He goes, if I was in battle, I'd bayonet a child. That's terrible. Oh God, no, that's not the type of leader that you want. It's not about switching off your mind. It's not about, you know, engaging in cult-like behaviour. It's about doing something a little bit different. The positivistic approach says, I like this definition of leadership, I have to say. Leadership is the process of influencing the activities of an organised group in its efforts towards setting and goal achievement. Leadership is about helping people achieve their goals. Key elements in this is that communication flows from one individual to the group. The leader is very reliant on followers. And the key way in which achievement is done, in which leadership is deemed effective, is through goal achievement. Constructionist approaches, on the other hand, if you look at that, that's a good definition of leadership, but it's all from the leader down, isn't it? It's like the leader is the important person, but who really makes leadership happen? This idea is that leadership is something that's co-produced. Look at this, this is a good definition. It's an influenced relationship amongst leaders and followers who intend real changes that reflect their mutual purposes. So it's multi-dimensional. There's more than one leader in the group, and leaders and followers work on problems that are substantial rather than superficial. Are leaders born or made? They're born in 30% of cases, they're made in 70% of cases, and our early childhood experiences are usually important in them. Leaders, you know, what makes a defensive leader? Confidence, integrity, connection, resilience. But look at this. What the research has told us are things like leaders have a high a high internal locus of control. Have you come across that phrase before, locus of control? We all have a locus of control. Some people have a locus of control that is external, and some people have a locus of control that is internal. If you have an external locus of control, it means that you feel that you are not in control of the major things that are happening to you in your life and dictate your future. That's if you've got an external locus of control. The world is to blame. If you have an internal locus of control, it means that no matter what situation you find yourself in, no matter what's happening to you, no matter what's going to happen to you, no matter what way things are panning out, you control the outcome to your own actions and your own activities. So I mean, sometimes in my teaching I've encountered this, where you know, a student hasn't studied for an exam, or they haven't prepared well, or done whatever, and they get a bad mark, and they blame the exam, they blame the exam conditions, they blame a lot of different things that are happening around them. But what they don't, but they will never take responsibility for it themselves. Well, not never. That's an example of somebody with an external locus of control. Leaders take responsibility. They have a moderate need for achievement and a low need for affiliation. And that means that they don't necessarily need everybody to like them as a result for what it is that they're doing. Look at how important followers are becoming in this setup. Karsten said, everybody said followers are active participants in how leadership happens. Karsten said in 2010 there are three categories of followers. Passive followers, people who just do what the leaders say. They defer and they're obedient to the leader. Active ones who believe leaders and followers are part of a team and they work together in partnership with the leader. Proactive leaders try to take on a role similar to the leader, and they constructively challenge the leader. They work with them. A more honest categorization of leadership for me, right, is this, offered by David Collinson in 2006. He said there's three forms of follower identity. Think about people that you might be working for now, and think about how you're going to work with them. The first one is the conformist. Somebody who follows the leader and goes along with them and does what they say. The next one is the resistant person, who refuses to conform and who undermines the leader's authority. This is what I've noticed in the organisation, these three categories. The conformist, the resistant, and finally, most common of the lot, the dramaturgical one. This is somebody who's an actor. They give the impression of being a good follower to the leader because it makes their life easier when they're working in the organization. This is, I think, one way of looking at followership, but it's not the whole lot, because the form of follower you are is determined by how you understand leadership. Social identity theory has a lot to tell us about this. And when we look at this is a theory to suggest that we define who we are largely in terms of the groups that we're memberships of. Our social identity is an extension of who we, is an extension of the self-concept. So as we try to maintain our self-esteem, as we're trying to make ourselves feel good about ourselves through life, we value different things. And group membership is actually really important to us. It's really important to us that we are seen to be parts of different groups that intersect throughout our lives. And the only way we find out is that if we, how important it is if we feel ourselves being rejected from membership of one particular group. This is, so you know, identifying yourself as being a manager or an engineer or, I don't know, a member of a political party or a religion or whatever. These are all, or follower of a football team or whatever it is. These are all critical parts of who we are, but they're defined in relation to who we are as part of a group. Group identity is important. Look at this. Leaders, according to this theory, leaders are selected or accepted by a group depending on how prototypical they are for that group. And what that means is that we tend to select leaders who are the most typical member of everybody else in the group. Not necessarily the most intelligent, not the one with the best vision, nothing to do with that, just the person who looks, thinks, and behaves like and shares the same values as everybody else in the group. What do you think of that? Think of groups that you're a member of. Because you know, sometimes we can assess just how leadership works in our own lives. If you've got a group of friends, has this ever happened to you? Where, you know, it's you've got a group of like 5 or 6 friends and you might be, you know, going out for an evening and one person says, let's go to get something to eat, and another person says, well, no, let's go and see this movie. How come the person who one person's suggestion wins out over the others and almost naturally always comes through? Is it because people like them more or whatever? Or is it because that they're more prototypical of that group? What does this tell us about the results of a recent election? The group becomes more important in the study of leadership than the personality of the leader. Going from trade studies, 1950s, post-World War II, where people are trying to study what makes a leader a better leader on the basis of their own personality, to ignore the leader, study the group if you want to see how leadership is done in that group. Here is a recent development published just last year, which is based on an approach called moral foundations theory. American social psychologist Jonathan Haidt wrote a book called The Righteous Mind. And he was trying to say, why are people ethical? Why do they behave in things in a particular way? And he had a range of these ethical test stories that are downright disgusting. Will I tell you one? No. And they're just little vignettes about things that people do that are morally reprehensible. And then he asked people, what was wrong with these stories ethically? What was wrong with them? And people would say, oh, it's just right, you just don't do that. And as he drilled into them, into these stories, he found that the people were actually not able to explain why they were unethical on the basis of whatever they were. And he said people try to reason these things afterwards. They try to make sense of them. And the reasoning attempts were quite, convoluted, and they actually didn't make any sense in their own right. This is really interesting because Haidt found out that when something feels wrong to us, if we're asked to reason why it is that it feels wrong to us, we usually do a very bad job. We assume that we're living in a rational, reasonable world where ethics can be decided. The right thing to do can be determined by philosophers or whatever. No, his point is that we just know it instinctively through years of evolution whether something is right or wrong to us, and the reasoning comes afterwards. We're dumbfounded if we try to reason it another way.
So in his moral foundations theory, he said that there are 6 discrete domains of human morality that vary from individual to individual and culture to culture. In some, number 1 is the care-harm foundation. And this comes from an evolutionary desire. You know, when you see a little baby and it's a newborn and everything, you feel all soft inside. You go, oh, that's lovely and cute. That isn't just because we're nice and we're susceptible to I don't know, teddy bears or whatever. What it means is that we have an inbuilt, we're designed to care for vulnerable people, especially babies and small ones. Do you know what I thought was really interesting yesterday? I'm not sure what it was like here, but in Ireland, you know, I was talking to some people, because we you know, I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I felt a disturbance in the force, and I went and I checked my phone, and Trump is winning the election, and I couldn't get back to sleep, right? So I was like this, and then, you know, I went down and I woke my wife up to go to work around 7 o'clock, and I said, tell her I wasn't. She was fine. She was going around. I said, and I had the television on, and the Sky News came down, and she started crying. She couldn't believe it. She's just really, really upset. And I thought God had said, you need more sleep. But then I noticed this. Colleagues in Maynooth University were teary-eyed. They were depressed. They were very, very upset by this. And now you think there is a real reason for this as well. You know, if America has an economic downturn, Ireland has a severe depression. So, you know, if things go wrong, we have a problem. But people were very upset. And as I asked them what was wrong, you know, the main thing that they said, how am I going to explain this to my kids? I'm not joking, that's what they said. 3 separate people said that to me within my first hour of work. How do because people have been feeding this message, this is not, you know, a man who isn't behaving well towards people who aren't his same racism. He's got, you know, he said some horrible things about people from Mexico. He said some disgusting things about women, and he calls them pigs and all. This is not how we train our sons to think about people, or our daughters how to think about people. And they picked up that this man is bad, and all of a sudden he's president. What message does that give out? Care and Harm Foundation come in. There was 2 articles straight away. One, and not just, you know, internet articles. One in the Guardian and one in the New Yorker yesterday. How do you tell your children about Trump? There's something in these. These don't happen out of nowhere. The Care Harm Foundation is something that's really important to us, but it's different for other people. Fairness and cheating. Sometimes you just behave well, sometimes you don't. Loyalty and betrayal. You know, are you loyal to the group? Do you remember people in the group? Is it, Haidt makes a very good point in his book where he says that the worst thing a person can be is not your enemy. The worst thing that can be is somebody who's meant to be on your side who doesn't support you. That we have, you know, and all throughout all the history and all our mythology and the religious thinking and everything, traitors have a special place of punishment. Sanctity or degradation. Some things are important, some things should not be allowed to be profaned. Authority or subversion. You know, to what extent? Leaders all need to have some form of authority, but to what extent does it have to be a dictatorship? I know you were joking, but you know, liberty and oppression. Followers need autonomy as well. So what Haidt is saying in his book is that there's no one single ethical code. That you go to any culture around the world and you will find these rendered in different ways, and some of them are different. They're understood differently in different scenarios. For example, the fairness part, the idea of fairness in the world. Trump has, I'm not going to clearly understood this, because he was able to say, well, there are people who are coming into our country who are taking your fair share. And that chimed with people very well. The fact that there's no basis to it is wrong. Do you know that net migration from the US to Mexico over the last few years has been 0? That, you know, that as many people are leaving as coming in. And in fact, if he built the wall, it would just be stopping Mexicans from leaving rather than stopping them to come in. So anyway, we're in a different ethical zone here. Moral foundations theory. Moralization is the process to which observers, look at this, confer a leader's action of moral relevance. Right? This is where things begin to get really interesting. Freud said that we project our internal subconscious mind onto people all the time. onto objects and things. We see things in them. We put a meaning on them that don't exist. This is what dreams do. You know, do you ever have a nightmare where you see something that's so terrifying, you wake up and you go, oh. You have people, I had a terrible nightmare last night. What was it about? And you go, oh, I walked into a room and there was a blanket on the back of a chair. It was horrible, But it doesn't matter what it was. It was the fact that it represented something else. Moralization is something that we do all the time. If you're at work and you tell stories and you hear people that are telling stories about things that have happened in the past, that's how values are passed around. And stories that's how people learn about the cultures that they find themselves in. Is that this is how values are put around. And you might think, well, okay, they're important stories and tales of the past of the organisation that they're trying to let you know. There's another type of story that's more common and more popular, and it's called, or storytelling, and it's called gossiping. And until recently, people don't gossip, haven't studied it, but they've realised that when people gossip, what they're doing is they're trading stories about the way that other people have violated some type of moral code within the organisation. You never go up to somebody and you say, what's your name? Sorry? What's your name? Yeah. Derek? Yeah. Barry? Yeah. So I never go up to somebody, hey, listen, did you hear the story about Barry, what he was doing? He went to work, he showed up on time, he did a really good job. That's not good gossip, okay? Did any good gossip on Britain? Okay. You're not going to tell us anything. That you just tell these things. So moralization is the process to which you try and project onto other people whether you think what it is that they've done is moral or not. So moralers, they moralize, or they see things as being morally significant when these actions align with your own moral foundation or with the foundation of an organizational culture. And the reason why you do that is that you're trying to maintain your own moral self-regard, the belief that we have to need that we're all good moral people, and a moral reputation itself. The reason why people try to behave ethically according to hate is mainly to make sure that we keep a good reputation for something. And the reason for that is that so we'll be allowed to remain within groups and not be ostracized from them. So our reputation becomes very important. And the cynical, nihilistic part of that is that, well, don't get caught. Don't let people find out that you're immoral. Hate challenges this later on down the line, but it's a really good example for how reputation and projection becomes very important. If a leader demonstrates, more than any, the Care Harm Foundation more than anything else, what they're trying to do, the way that that's interpreted, is that they support follower well-being. If they're fair, it's treating followers fairly. If they're loyal, demonstrating loyalty to the collective. If they behave in a way that's, matches with the religious or ethical codes of your society, that's seen as somebody who's being, respectful of somebody else's need to have spiritual superiority. If they make firm decisions in a very strong way, then what they're doing is maintaining order and direction. On the other hand, if they are allowing their followers, if they're promoting the culture of openness, as Jim was saying, what they're doing is they're allowing their followers to have autonomy. And all of these things mean different people to different as they work through the organization. If they are, some of them are pro-social, voluntary action that's undertaken to benefit others. Some are pro-organizational, trying to get people to think about the organization as the home where they work in. Pro-leader is pro-social behaviour that's only taken to undertake the benefit the leader, and pro-individual behaviour is behaviour that's aimed to enable individuals to act autonomously. So what is actually responsible leadership? When we're looking back at charismatic leadership, and we were trying to get to the core of, and we're trying to get close to this idea of what came after it, I think there were three main movements. The first one was one that was called principle-centered leadership by Stephen Covey, who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it's a really simple idea behind this. Principle-centered leadership is this idea that we all have to identify what the key principles are we want to live our lives by, and to stick to them no matter what decision it is that you're trying to, no matter what it is that you're trying to do. But the problem is, how do you know what those principles are? And Covey comes up with a really, really good mechanism for doing this. Okay? Because you can't be for every single value that you think is important. You have to have 2 or 3 that's most important. And Kobe says, okay, you're going to have to do a little bit of a journey with me on this here, okay? A bit of a leap of imagination. Imagine it is your 80th birthday, okay? And there's a big party been held for you by everybody you know, and everybody who's currently in your life is still around and everything. So, and we'll pick a group of the 3 most important, okay? Let's imagine it's your, nobody married here? Where? No.
Yes.
Yeah, he is. Sorry, how are you? Okay, so your spouse. Okay. Everybody else, let's say one of your parents, your best friend, and let's say your business partner, or somebody you've worked very closely with. So you've got those 3 in your mind, 4 in your place, okay? Right. Or if you know in the future you'd be thinking of one of your children or whatever. So your best friend, business partner, and one of your parents. You've got them. Now they have been given, it's a packed schedule at this party, there's a lot of things happening, but they've been given 1 minute each to stand up and to say something about you. Right? 1 minute each, and they're going to be, the microphone's going to be taken off them if they can't say it. So they're not going to stand up and make a joke. It's not the best man speech, okay? So they're going to say things about you. The one thing that I always knew about Nelson was the one thing that you could say about him, always integrity. Nobody could ever say those things, but you know, about integrity. But what are the things that those people say? Just those words, the big things that they think about you, right? That you want them to say. That makes a difference to you in the life. And that will help you distill what your principles are. It'll also help you think about, well, okay, I want people to say that about me, so what have I done today to make them say that about me? You know, brings your life to be reflected. Principle-centered leadership. The next one was one that was called servant leadership by Robert Greenleaf. And the idea of this is that if the leader in an organization behaves as if they are the servant for everybody working for the organization, that organization will work, will be a truly ethical organization, and it'll be leadership at its very best. But here's the big difference between that and other forms. He's the servant of everybody who works for the organization, but not clients of the organization. Okay? He's there to support everybody else who works within that organization. It has been tried and tested. It's research and interest in it is growing again. There's been a huge discussion about responsible leadership in recent years, but there's still been little definition, little research, little theory. We still don't know what it means to be a responsible leader. And most is taken on in relation to CSR. It's, you know, the words that people use are things like moral leadership, authentic leadership, and the ethical developments of the ethical elements of transformative leadership. But if you were to look at this one school of thought, the fourth school, if you like, you got principle-centered leadership, servant leadership, and have a look at level 5 leadership. See what you think of this as a form of ethical or responsible leadership. Level 5 leadership. Jim Collins is a management theorist. Jim Collins, if you want Jim Collins to work for you for a day as a consultant, he'll charge you $100,000 per day, so it must be good. He did a long scale. He did a lot of study. He studied companies who transitioned from solid performance to high growth levels, which were sustained over a 15-year period, independent of trends within their sector. And he found a lot of different things that they did. This is about companies who've got a sustainable base behind them, and so you've had sustainable growth even during crisis periods. And one of the things that he found was that the leaders who worked for these companies were with them the whole time. These weren't people who flew in, made a big show, stayed for 3 or 4 years, made a few changes, and then moved on to their next position. They settled and they lived in the community where the organization was actually based. And they had two factors that helped them be these level 5 leaders who made a real difference. And the two factors were this. They had a huge concern for the technical outputs of the organization. Production and operations, stuff had to be done well, customers had to be, items delivered and shipped on time, good R&D, the technical work of the organization had to be done very, very strongly. The difference was, on people, their attitude to people was one that was based on intense personal humility. Humility. They were humble people who never wanted to promote themselves. They were anti-charismatic in their own right. Almost to the extent that sometimes when Collins was working with them, he believed that they had low self-esteem. For example, say we have, I'm a level 5 leader, for example, and Moses has been working on the project that is going to be our flagship project for the next decade or so. And it's launched, and it's a huge success. And they come to interview me because I am the chief executive of the company and I'm the one. And I say, no, it actually has nothing to do with me. All I did was listen to the great idea that Moses and his team came up with. All I did was to give them permission to go ahead, and I probably could have even supported it a bit more. Listen, you want to talk about the success of this, don't talk to me, talk to Moses, he's the main guy you got to go to, he's the star, right? Now, on the other hand, let's say the project is a colossal failure and it's really embarrassing, and it's everybody in the industry is laughing at us and the company goes into crisis. They come looking for an interview, and they say, let's talk to the project lead who did. I said, no, that has nothing to do with Moses. That's me. I was the one who I take the criticism when it comes to the organization, but I never take the praise. And you're probably thinking, why would you do that? Think about what it must be like working for somebody who's demonstrated that. Think about you'd be able to bring them anything. You'd be able to bring them your best. You would never want to let them down. That is a level 5 leader. And a level 5 leader is somebody who's around to make sure that the company lasts for a number of years. In other words, they take a long-term perspective, and a long-term perspective is what we mean by responsibility. Responsibility, the way that most people used to think of responsibility is that it comes from, sorry, I say I'm nearly out of time here, so I'll finish up this. Responsibility comes from legal studies. And when we talk about responsibility, lawyers tend to see responsibility as, where do we put the blame when something goes wrong? Who do I sue when something goes wrong? Who do I blame for the consequences of something? But Iris Marion Young, who was a legal scholar working in New York University, died of breast cancer, unfortunately, a couple of years ago in her 50s. But she said, she critiqued this. She said that really when you look at it, say, for example, somebody who commits a crime, and they had to steal because they had no options to do it because they were poor or whatever, and they committed a crime that might have involved stealing, whatever. She said, the fact that that person wasn't given opportunities meant that they had some type of structural injustice done against them. And really, if you have the power to change something and you don't, and it results in somebody being hurt, then you're responsible for whatever happened. So she said that she, instead of having a formal legal responsibility, she said that there are dimensions of a thing called proactive responsibility. She said that you never try, if you're behaving unethically as a leader, if you try to identify somebody to blame for a problem, you always have to look at the background norms and circumstances to see if they were unfair or unethical. You can never change anything by focusing on fixing just what happened in the present, by looking what happened in the past. You have to focus to the future, and you have to be able to ensure that everybody who has a chance to change something to make the world better or to make it brighter in the future has a chance to do that as well. Leadership, from her perspective, is one that instead of looking at managing people or managing them down, is about looking at the circumstances and the time continuum which they take, and more importantly looking towards the future. So, if you're to look at the history of leadership and the different type of things that have happened out there, in your life that have caused you to arrive at having a particular idea about how things should be done. That's all fine. The most important thing that I ask you to do is to develop your own working draft, maybe keep a journal yourself, your own implicit leadership theory. Write it down so it can help you to exploit the opportunities to behave as responsible, ethical leaders in the future, and to be able to understand when you've encountered real opportunities for leadership development. I'm sorry I went a bit over time there as well, but I know it's been a long evening for you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Good stuff, John. Thank you. Just before you go, folks. So thanks indeed, John. Lots of. Just keep it inside here for 2 minutes, folks. Hello. So we'll just keep it for 2 minutes. So again, the thing with the exams is there's 10 topics, and you'll only have to answer questions in 6 topics. Okay, I was just again reminding myself of the module map. So I think what our plan is, we're talking to the external examiners and that, is that we'll try to do a multiple choice type exam. So for each section, say for leadership, we give you a few multiple choice questions. Okay? So that might be, for example, we can chat about this, John. According to Grint, who's most likely to have the crucible experience? A manager, a leader, leader. What?
Can I let's scribble these up as we go along?
No, I got it. Don't worry about it. You get the idea, right? So there's going to be 10 topics. You're going to pick 6 topics, and within each of those topics, then we'll have a couple of multiple choice questions. And I think we're going to do the same for Professor Barlington's section. I'll talk to you again about that, but I just wanted to flag that to you now, so that when you're kind of thinking through things and that as the course progresses. Okay, so we'll see you next week. You're going to do the finance stuff. Again, just thanks a million, John. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, John. Super. Thanks, John. Super. Yeah, lots. I got a few MCQ questions, actually. So, yeah.
I use them.
Do you?
Okay. They take all the work documents
and can do the students do it on the computer?
I just use the exams. I print out a sheet.
Yeah.
And it's in the exam paper. They pull it off. I have a little grid that I just look over myself. But
this here now, the new thing is if I formulate it correctly, give them the questions, press a button. Students are going to be scheduled into an exam cluster computer, so they can log on. Their web access is locked down. Brilliant. And the results are listed. So a bit of hassle now because I have to come up for the 3 questions. Actually, this tape thing might be on. Hang on a sec. Is there a microphone around somewhere? Because I noticed when there was volume. Maybe that's there. Oh, there it is. There, yeah. So they actually. So it's still possibly being recorded. Hi, everybody. Okay. Well, I'll run those ones past you, actually, because we've got some good ones there, but as I said, we won't review thanks, John. Oh, do you? Yeah. Wow, good to see some blackboards as well. Whiteboard.
You know, it's one of those things that we did a training session with John Townsend.
Yeah. Master Trainer Institute.
With the whiteboards was
John Murray was great for teaching strategy with a whiteboard. Really, John, yeah. He used to fill a whiteboard. And I heard another thing about him last week was someone was saying to me that the measures I was annoying that locked the doors. He was using the original. He was locked. And he'd teach a strategy case, then he'd basically start blank and just walk across, you know?
John Mack used to do the thing.
chairs and everything moved outside the room so people would arrive in. John would be like, you're meant to be here, and they'd all get really annoyed. And then for 10 or 15 minutes of this, they'd go, okay, I'm just trying to get the point of it, culture shock and everything. He'd have all their chairs brought in and everything. Oh yeah, it's great real learning experience. But John would piss everybody off.
Who was this John?
John Mack.
The Macklin guy?
Yeah.
What I said.
I don't know, he's gone to the IMI, but he's still working away.
You're right, yeah. Yeah.
Fisher's out in Australia.
Huh?
Fisher's out in Australia.
What?
Head of Executive Development.
Right. He'd pop up on LinkedIn. Right.
Business school someplace in Scotland for
That's 6 months or something.
yeah.
I don't know. Hi. Sure.
The multiple choice is just, you mean 10 for each
Kevin, how many? Oh, not 10. It's only 2 or 3 or 4.
2 or 3 from the
Leadership. Yeah.
Okay.
So I suppose because we have
You think it's
six topics.
You think it's better or
I think
not?
so. Yeah. No, I think it'd be. What did you lose?
Really?
Oh, the earring. I figured that. Yeah.
What was it like?
Never mind.
Yeah, everybody's looking for your earring, you see?
It's
But are you
fine.
sure you left it here?
I buy other one.
Well, yeah. Are you sure it dropped here?
No, we just took a look and it's not there. Thank you. You see?
One earring is no good. No.
No.
It's fine,
One is
thanks a
no
lot.
good. Yeah.
See
All right.
you.
See you.
Bye.
Thank
See
you.
you.
Goodbye.
See you. See you. Now, so it's not a bad one, John. I feel like it's just so.
It was a good
Yeah. 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 And actually, I just close the window up at the top there, just to. Some guys saying that all the heat is going out the window. It is, yeah, because we have to keep the back window door closed because.
You can never really get room temperature right in that should take this.
Pardon? No, I'd say this these returns really, you know, or left like or whatever. That's something people moved on. Funny enough, I was there only there 2 weeks ago and I've been there a good while, but
How are things?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, we got everything here, John.
Yes, I'm all good.
Yeah, again, apologies for the marketing. I intended to just go back to my office. And, don't worry, I pick them up there, you know.